As far as job interview, I think the biggest misconception is that you need to pretend to be someone you're totally not. If you think of it as a two-way thing and you're assessing fit, and this is kind of like an experiment, then you're throwing the experiment if you go in with a fake version of yourself.
Hey everybody, Marielle Segarra here. I'm the host of NPR's Life Kit, and that's Cynthia Pong. She's the founder and CEO of Embrace Change, a career coaching and consulting firm.
We specialize in working with women of color, proud to be an all-POC team, and it's our singular mission to get all women of color, and by extension, all people of color, the money, power, and respect that we all deserve in the workplace.
On this episode of Life Kit, Cynthia and I are going to help you prepare for your next job interview. And we'll also put her tips into practice by doing some role play. So, as Cynthia was saying before, there's this big misconception about job interviews, that during them, you need to pretend to be someone you're not.
There is a level of, I guess you could say, maybe a little bit of performance or decorum, or at least something different than if you were chilling at your house with your friends. Like, you know, there's a place and a time for like you to be different sides of yourself. But this idea that you need to completely adopt a different version of you or what you think the other person wants you to be, that I would say is the biggest misconception about interviews.
So let's say you got an interview, you're trying to research the company and the people ahead of time. What should you come to the interview knowing?
So the basics, definitely you should be familiar with and like pretty well versed in. So what is this company organization doing? What's their mission? Do they have a value statement or things like that? Those can be really helpful. I would also look up the people that you're interviewing with, because that can help ease a lot of stress around it. If you have some basic understanding of who's this person, what's their role, you know, find them on LinkedIn or you know, Google it or whatever, just the basic information about what they do, their responsibilities, their trajectory. Those are kind of the basic fundamentals.
This feels like the next thing that's always on my mind. How do you decide what to wear on the day of the interview?
If you think of like a Venn diagram, where one of the circles is what makes you feel comfortable and confident and like kind of your best self, then the other circle is what you imagine would be the appropriate look, if you will, for someone who's doing that role or that position. So then the overlap between those two circles would be where I would try to aim for and think of that as your sweet spot. So what makes you feel confident and competent and like your best self, and also whatever's overlapping with what you think would be appropriate for that job. I also, you know, I'm a former public defender, so I like believe in second chances and like us redeeming ourselves. So if you have a bad outfit for one interview, it's not necessarily going to make or break the situation. You know, like I like to trust that people will be able to see beyond kind of the surface. And if not, then maybe that's a red flag. It's not a fit.
So let's say it's the week and a half before the interview and you're trying to prepare. Where do you start?
So I recommend people think of 3 main points that if the interviewer or interviewers forget all else that happened, the 3 things that you want them to remember about you. If they ask you a question about something and maybe you fumble the answer a little bit because you're like, I didn't prep that one and like, I don't really know. Doesn't matter. Find a way to circle it back to one of those 3 points. What that principle is actually called is messaging discipline. It's just rerouting like a GPS to those 3 points. Additionally, there's this concept of primacy and recency, which is that people tend to remember the first thing that you said and the last thing that you said. Everything in the middle is kind of mushy. But you can hack this by injecting more breaks. So even by taking like a longer pause, you create another primacy recency opportunity for you. But if you throw that thing in at the end with your last 3 points, that's the most recent thing they will have heard before they, you know, leave the interview or whatnot. And it just makes it more likely that they'll remember you for one of those 3 points.
I'm going to think super carefully about the last thing I say to you today.
Aw.
No, how do you come up with those 3 things? How do you decide what they are for this job?
Well, one place you could start is like looking at the job description, although that's not the be all end all. I would take it a level deeper if you can. But look at the job description and they'll say like, these are the things that a strong candidate will have. We're like, these are the things we're looking at. And then you can reroute as many of your answers to that as possible. Another way you could figure out what your 3 points are is going from an internal perspective. Like the type of role that I want to have next is really going to help me leverage these 3 things about me. It can be kind of a litmus test of like, okay, if I emphasize these three things, whether they move me forward or not in the next round, that's going to tell me whether I'm on the right track or not for me.
Can you give me an example of something that might be a weak spot you could prepare for? If somebody is an employee and they've never managed anybody, but they're applying for a supervisor job, or maybe if you're applying to host a podcast, but you don't have that much experience with it.
Yeah, let's take the example of the host. It's not about like putting on a defensive case. That feels like a deficit. And it feels like something that I then have to prove that I do have a ton of hosting experience and I may or may not, right? So don't take the bait and go down that route with it. Just be like, okay, well, what is hosting experience actually about? Like, what's under the surface of this iceberg? What are their actual concerns? Are they concerned that I can't learn how to do something on the job? I also want to emphasize that you don't need to check all of the boxes and all of those bullet points on a job description to apply for a job. Please don't do that. If you can check off half, and if you know how to learn something, like anything, if you've ever learned anything, and I guarantee you have, then apply for it. Don't self-reject and take yourself out of the game. Similarly, when you go into the interview, you don't have to literally be doing the job right there. It's not even day one yet. As long as you can show that you have the building blocks and then the capacity to learn and adjust and evolve, then that's it.
Okay, so on the day of the interview, the night before, you're trying to get some sleep, you can't fall asleep. You're doing your best, but the morning of, you get nervous.
Yeah.
All of us get nervous before these things. What can you do to bring yourself back to a grounded place?
I am a big believer in whatever kind of grounding practices work best for you. So if that's mindfulness, if it's meditation, if it's affirmations, taking regular walks, or being outside to get fresh air, if it's time that you need to spend with a pet or a loved one, whatever it is that makes you feel like the most grounded and connected to your core, I think those are really important things to do on a daily basis, really leading up to this. Bonus points if you can do it more than once a day. But think about the interview process also in this framework. There's this concept I like to talk to folks about, and I call it the composure triangle. If you imagine a spectrum, like a line, on the one side of the spectrum is collapse, and on the other side of the spectrum is posturing. So over here on collapse, that would be like if I went into the interview, you're interviewing me, and I was like, I think I'm a great candidate for this job. But you know what? If you don't feel that way because you feel like I have a lack of hosting experience, I just want to let you know I will try so hard. Please just give me a chance. I will do it for free. Right?
So that's painful to hear. Yeah.
Anyway, so this is the side, frankly, that most of the folks we work with end up being closer to this end of the spectrum. So, you make a claim, immediately collapse and put yourself kind of subservient to, you let the other person have power over you. Other side of the spectrum is posturing. Posturing is where I go in and I'm like, I'm the best person you could ever hire. Frankly, I'm shocked you even made me do an interview. You should be throwing money at me right now or I'm going to leave. Right? Just come to it. Exactly, right? Yeah, and that's what's going to happen. So you have the spectrum, collapse, posturing. Most of us at any given time are back and forth, somewhere on the spectrum. Get off of that spectrum completely. It's a triangle because we're looking for a third place that is a place of composure for you. And that means you're not going in there trying to have power over them. You're not going in there letting them have power over you. You are a person that has agency and power. I am a person that has agency and power. And this is all about, is this a good fit?
All right, it's time for some role play. Cynthia has a law degree and she was once a public defender. So I came up with this scenario. I'll play the role of a hiring manager at a legal services group that advocates for economic justice. Let's call it the Segarra Institute. She comes in for an interview. We sit down, shake hands, look each other in the eye, and I ask her the open-ended question that a lot of interviewers start with. Tell me about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a lawyer and an advocate. I've been doing this work for over 7 years. The mission and the idea of making sure that all of our communities have equal access to economic power and opportunity, that's what drives me day to day. I'm a self-starter, I'm a quick study, and personally, I love everything about NPR Life Kit and Rottweilers.
Wow, Rottweilers. Why Rottweilers?
They're the advocate's dog because they're literally kind of a misunderstood underdog in the world of dogs. For us, as the advocates and all of the clients that we serve and the communities we serve, there's a lot of that, a misunderstanding of us. And if people really just got to know us as people, or as dogs in this case, like I think it would be really different.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Just a quick note here. That answer is kind of fun, right? Because it tells me a little detail about Cynthia and her personality, but she also makes the connection between that detail and the job. Okay, well, tell me why you want to work here at the Segarra Institute.
Yeah, well, you've been kind of the gold standard at the cutting edge of this work. So I want to be able to leverage my skill set to be able to push the envelope on what is possible. And so I want to be at a place that's really leading this work and the whole field.
Okay, now another common interview question that trips a lot of people up. Talk to me about a time that you made a mistake at work.
Right. So one that still all these years later really sticks out in my mind. When I was a paralegal, one of my first jobs out of college, I was probably a couple weeks into the job. And one day I remember one of the partners came up to me and asked me for a certified mail receipt. I was like, I don't even know what that is. But like, I was like looking around for it. I knew there was a stack of them somewhere. I was like looking. And slowly I feel that like panic setting in because we're not finding it. We turned my desk and the whole cube like upside down looking for it. And it wasn't there, Marielle. And it turned out that was like a really important issue for the case. So what that really taught me early on in my career was to ask a lot of questions at the beginning so that I could know which things that I might not think are important are actually important, not to be afraid to, look dumb or stupid and just ask. And then also to be really conscientious about the things around because you never know what could be super important for a client's case, for, one of our appellate appeals to the Supreme Court, things like that.
Next up, another tough question. Basically, I ask her, are you sure you have enough experience for this job? This job does involve managing a couple of junior staffers, and I see that you don't have that kind of experience, at least from what I can tell here. Do you think that would be a problem?
Oh, no. I mean, so I haven't formally managed other folks, but I've worked in a couple of capacities, both paid and unpaid, where I have been the lead in a situation, like the lead point person, and de facto managing either a project or a team. So I'm fully familiar with what it takes to coordinate large groups of people. And also, I think one of the skill sets that I bring is my ability to understand where another person is at in terms of their learning journey and what they need to do, and also helping coach them up in terms of their awareness around their strengths and areas for growth to help them step more into the role that they need to play.
What would you say is your biggest weakness?
Right. So earlier I said one of my biggest strengths is focus. The flip side of that is that I can then lose track of time. And so in the past, there have been a few times where I've been either running late to another meeting, or I haven't allocated enough time for the other things that I have to get done. So I've known this for a while about myself and figured out a way that I can optimize the benefits of having that strength of focus and also minimize the negative impacts of that. So I set backup alarms or notifications for things. I'm cognizant of what my schedule is for the day. I keep my calendar up so that I don't suddenly lose track of time. So that's probably one of my bigger weaknesses.
Okay, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
At this stage of my career, I want to be able to serve kind of the mission and the work first and foremost.
Okay, well, I just want to say I am totally going to hire you.
Great, I got the job.
Yeah, I don't pay, but,
okay.
you'll get a lot of exposure.
Perks? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk to my landlord about the paying and exposure.
I think I asked you about your greatest weakness, and you said one of my strengths is focus. Right. And I didn't remember that. But then when you said it, I was like, aha.
I did that intentionally. And also, maybe I did forget to say focus the first time I introduced myself, but it doesn't even matter, you see, because the way you perceived it was like, oh yeah, that thing. And that's all that matters.
Okay, so you get to the end of the interview and the interviewer asks, do you have any questions for me? What are some things that you can say?
So where do you all see the organization in 5 or 10 years? What does success look like in terms of what you want to see from somebody in this role, like your ideal candidate in this role? Who would be someone who's a bad fit for this role? What are some red flags that you think really just wouldn't be appropriate for what you're looking for. What's your favorite part of working at the Segarra Institute? And if you have a least favorite, what's your least favorite? This is probably not for the first interview, but later on. When was the last person on this team like promoted or rescoped into a bigger role? Am I taking over for somebody who's currently in this position, or is it a new position? Asterisk on that. If that would be easily Googleable, don't ask that question. Yeah, so there's some questions.
After the interview, though, how would you suggest following up and how soon?
Right. I generally think within 24 hours, sending a nice thank you note, I think is always a great touch and just brings a little bit of that closure there. It doesn't have to be anything super long or fancy. In fact, I recommend kind of against it, just short and sweet. Like, thank you so much for your time, Marielle. I really enjoyed speaking to you about Rottweilers. No, you probably want to use that example. Really enjoyed talking to you about, where you see the Institute in 5 or 10 years. Like, really appreciate, all of our commonalities and the alignment, I think, between what I bring to the table and what you all are looking for. Look forward to continuing the conversation. Cynthia.
If you were going to pick a word that people should try to embody as they approach a job interview, what would it be?
Grounded. So you remember that composure triangle I was telling you about before, right? And the way I set it up was the spectrum was here, and then we were looking for a third place called composure. Well, if you actually flip that triangle, it's this idea, this visual of being actually more grounded and rooted in your core and what you're looking for, and those 3 main talking points and that type of thing. So that's what I would choose for my word is grounded. And I hope it helps folks.
Yeah. Cynthia, thank you so much.
Thank you. So fun.
Okay, time for a recap. As you prepare for a job interview, think about your big 3 points. Maybe you're a great communicator or a clear writer, or you know how to help everyone on your team thrive. Whatever those points are, have them ready to go. Also, be ready to talk about your weaknesses or about a time that you made a mistake at work. Ideally, these are things that you've worked on, and you can talk about that too. On interview day, wear something that you feel comfortable in and that makes you feel like your best self. Maybe you have a hair clip or a button-down shirt that always looks great on you. Also remember, composure. The person interviewing you is not above you. They're not better than you. You're 2 people with skills and needs, trying to figure out if this is a good fit. And for more Life Kit, check out our other episodes. We've interviewed Cynthia before on how to switch careers and also on how to hunt for a job. You can find those episodes and more at npr.org/lifekit. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at npr.org/lifekitnewsletter.